All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to get into Nvidia. I mean, everyone's talking about them, right? Especially with this whole AI explosion happening. And you sent over some fascinating stuff for us to look at, including their annual report, the 2025 10K.
Yeah, that report, it really dives deep into their whole operation, like how they
Mm,
make money, how they see the future, all of that.
exactly. So, what we want to do today is, I guess, three things really. One, get a sense of their long term plan, especially when it comes to AI. Two, see what their latest financial results tell us about where they stand right now. And, well, three, unpack this massive growth they've had in the past year. It's been pretty crazy to watch.
Definitely. And I think it's important, a lot of people might still think of Nvidia as like that gaming graphics card
Yeah.
company, but they've really changed. They've become this full stack computing company. They're all about accelerated computing. And when you consider their CDA platform, which is like the foundation for so much GPU computation these days, plus their ability to deliver these huge data center scale solutions, well, you see how they're kind of at the heart of this whole AI boom.
Absolutely. Their impact on modern AI, it's gigantic. And it's interesting. The report actually highlights 2012 as a kind of turning point.
Oh, yeah, with the AlexNet thing.
Exactly. AlexNet, a neural network trained on Nvidia GPUs. That was like, I don't know, a big bang moment for modern AI.
Totally. It showed the world what their parallel processing could do for deep learning. Nobody had seen anything like it before.
And from there, man, they haven't slowed down. They just keep innovating.
Right? I mean, look at the Tensor Core GPUs they brought out in 2017, purpose-built for AI. Then they go and acquire Mellanox in 2020, which brings in those data processing units, the DPUs, and those are crucial for handling the insane amount of data these AI systems have to process.
It's almost like they're playing chess, thinking several moves ahead.
Yeah. They're not just building individual components, they're creating whole ecosystems for different industries.
Right, right. Like NVIDIA Drive for self-driving cars,
Yeah.
Clara for healthcare, and Omniverse for like what, industrial digitalization?
Right,
Wow.
exactly. Plus, they've got NVIDIA AI Enterprise, which gives companies the software foundation they need to use and manage AI applications. It's a whole package deal.
And speaking of foundations, in 2023, they released Grace, their first data center CPU. That's a big move.
Huge. It shows they want to control not just the specialized acceleration, but the core processing power, too. So they're saying, we're not just part of the AI story, we're the whole story.
Exactly. And the investment they're making is insane, over $58 billion in R&D since the company started.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, the report says over half their engineers are now focused on software. So it's not just about the chips anymore. It's about the whole system, the hardware and the software working together.
It's kind of like they're not just building the car, they're building the roads and the traffic lights too.
That's a good analogy.
Right. And beyond the AI stuff, their GPUs are still killing it in professional visualization.
Oh, yeah. That's a big part of their business, even if it doesn't get as much hype as the AI stuff.
It's helping designers, manufacturers, people creating digital content work way more efficiently. And now, with generative AI being built into all these creative tools, the demand for their RTX GPUs is going through the roof.
It all goes back to what they call their full stack innovation approach. They're constantly trying to improve performance at every level. The architecture of the chips, the systems, how everything connects, the algorithms, and of course the software. They want to blow past the limits of Moore's law.
It's ambitious, to say the least. And it's not just about commercial stuff either. Their Earth 2 initiative is pretty wild.
Oh, you mean building a digital twin of the whole planet?
Yeah. To help predict climate change and explore ways to deal with it, it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It shows you the potential scale of their technology. But the report also gets real about some of the challenges they're facing, like those U.S. export controls are a big deal.
Yeah, that's having a real impact on their long-term strategy, especially in China and other regions. I mean, they list a bunch of products affected, A100, H100, even some of their newer architectures like the B100 and GB200, plus some high-end RTX GPUs. They all need licenses to be sold internationally now, unless there's some specific exception.
Right, and they're saying straight up that these controls are already hurting their competitiveness. And if things get stricter, it could seriously damage their business and their bottom line.
It's a tricky situation, right? Like they're this global company, but they have to navigate these really complex geopolitical issues.
Totally. And the report talks about how they're worried about further changes to these export rules. It could make it hard to sell what they already have or even develop new products that can be sold without those restrictions. They could basically get shut out of a big chunk of the Chinese market and other key areas.
It's definitely a hurdle they need to overcome, but it's interesting to see how they're adapting.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the report talks about how they're expanding their data center product line with stuff that doesn't need those specific licenses. And they're pushing hard to create new products designed specifically for the Chinese market. They even say their data center revenue in China actually grew in 2025,
Hmm.
although it's still not back to where it was before those export controls kicked in back in late 2023.
It sounds like they're trying to find ways to keep moving forward, even with all this
All
uncertainty.
right. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about their financials.
Hmm.
I mean, the big headline from the 2025 fiscal year is that massive revenue jump. They hit $130.5 billion. That's a 114% increase year over year. It's insane.
It really is. And when you look at their different business segments, you see where that explosive growth is coming from. The data center segment, that's the real powerhouse. Their revenue there went up 142%.
Yeah, they basically say that's all thanks to the huge demand for their Hopper architecture. Everyone wants to build large language models, recommendation engines, generative AI, and that's exactly what Hopper is built for.
And they also started shipping their new Blackwell architecture systems late in 2025. So that's going to be a huge growth driver going forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. Keep an eye on that one. But it wasn't just data center, right? They had growth across the board. Gaming was up 9%, thanks to their GeForce RTX 40 series. Professional visualization saw a nice bump of 21%, driven by those Ada RTX workstations we were talking about. And even automotive grew a solid 55%, mostly from their self-driving platform sales. It's impressive to see them growing in so many different areas.
They're really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And all that extra revenue helped their profitability too. Their gross margin went up, thanks to a bigger share of the revenue coming from that high-margin data center segment.
Right. But of course, we got to look at the expenses too. Operating expenses jumped up 45% year over year.
Yeah, and the report breaks that down. A lot of it was from higher compensation and benefits, which makes sense because they're hiring like crazy and wages are going up overall. And they're spending a ton on R&D, on all that compute infrastructure they need to develop these new products. You got to spend money to stay at the cutting edge, especially in this industry.
No doubt. And then there's taxes. Their income tax expense in 2025 was $11.1 billion, way up from $4.1 billion the year before. Their effective tax rate also inched up to 13.3%.
Yeah, the report gets into why that rate is lower than the standard U.S. federal rate. It's kind of complicated, but stuff like tax benefits from foreign income, stock-based compensation, and research tax credits, but at least they're being transparent about it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, another interesting point from the report is about their capital expenditures. They more than tripled in 2025, hitting $3.4 billion, and they're expecting them to go even higher in 2026.
Wow, that's a lot of investment. It really shows they're serious about building the infrastructure they need to support all their growth plans. AI development and deployment, that stuff takes serious resources.
For sure. And they're not just investing in the business, they're also returning a lot of capital to shareholders. Their share buyback program is huge. They spent $34 billion buying back stock in 2025, and they authorized another $50 billion later in the year. In early 2025, they bought back 29 million shares for $3.7 billion.
That's a big chunk of change. And they're doing it to offset the dilution from employee stock grants, which is pretty common in the tech world. It's a way to keep shareholders happy.
Right. And on top of the buybacks, they also paid out $834 million in cash dividends to shareholders in 2025. They're really using every tool in the box to reward their investors.
It seems like they're striking a good balance between reinvesting in the business and giving back to shareholders.
Agreed. So let's circle back to their growth in 2025 for a second. We talked about that 114% revenue increase overall, but what were the real drivers behind it?
Well, like we've been saying, the data center segment was the biggest factor. Everyone's going crazy for their Hopper platform, using it for all those key AI applications we talked about.
Right.
And within the data center segment itself, their computing revenue was up a whopping 162%.
Right.
But they also had strong growth in their networking revenue, which was up 51%. That includes their Ethernet for AI solutions, like Spectrum X. It shows that it's not just about the raw processing power, it's about having the high-speed connections to handle all that data flowing through these massive AI systems.
Yeah, it's got to be a well-oiled machine, so to speak. But it wasn't just data center, right?
Right. Gaming, professional visualization, and automotive all contributed too. Each segment had its own success story, whether it was new GPUs attracting gamers, more professionals adopting RTX workstations, or the rising sales of their self-driving platforms. It shows they're hitting the mark in a lot of different markets.
Absolutely. Now, the report also highlighted the big jump in their R&D spending, which was up 49%, and their sales, general, and administrative expenses were up 32% too.
Right. As we talked about before, that's mostly because they're hiring a ton of people and they're investing heavily in developing all these new products. It costs money to stay ahead of the curve, especially in a fast-paced industry like this.
No doubt about it. And one final interesting detail from the report, their total assets grew significantly, including a big jump in their inventories, which reached $10.1 billion.
That's a big increase.
They also increased their inventory provisions, which means they're being cautious about the risks that come with having a lot of inventory on hand. It's good to see them managing their finances responsibly, especially with all this rapid growth.
Agreed. And speaking of growth, their employee count is now around 36,000, with most of them working in R&D. What's really impressive is their low turnover rate, just 2.5% in 2025.
Wow, that's really low.
It means they're not only attracting top talent, but they're also keeping them happy. That kind of stability is really valuable, especially for a company that's pushing the boundaries of innovation like Nvidia.
Absolutely. So to sum it all up, this deep dive into Nvidia, based on all the great materials sent over, shows a company that's laser focused on AI and is investing heavily to achieve its long-term goals. Their 2025 financial report shows incredible growth across the board, particularly in their data center segment, which is being driven by the huge demand for their cutting-edge solutions. They're innovating like crazy, expanding their operations, and building a world-class team. It's really an impressive story.
Totally agree. And it's important to remember all this information is straight from your sources, giving us a really solid understanding of where NVIDIA stands today and where they're headed in this exciting new world of accelerated computing and artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. With NVIDIA in such a strong position and AI advancing so rapidly, what kind of big changes might we see in society and the economy in the coming years? How will these evolving technologies and the complex geopolitical landscape shape the future? It's something worth thinking about as we watch this all unfold.